I'm okay with the sexism.
I was
Let's
okay
get to what
with
I
the
really have a
sexism
problem
and
with.
misogyny. That's not what I had a problem with. Hi there, and welcome to Jav and Charles Season 2, Episode 3. I'm very proud I got that correct on the first take, since today, Jav pointed out that since yesterday was the day the first episode dropped, I had put that it was Episode 2 of Season 2. Then I tweeted, after he had tweeted out about starting Season 2, that Season 3 had dropped. So I have moved from episodes and issues to seasons and episode issues on numbering. So not only can I not speak, I can't count. Hi, Jav. How you doing?
Hey, Charles. I'm good. Hey, you know what? Numbers are hard. So is typing, by the way.
I have...
So is talking.
Excuse me. Well, episode 1, you were having the coughing fit that I had to cut out. Now I'm going to have coughing fits that I have to cut out. So, yes, numbers are hard. Anything past 1 evidently is a problem. Or maybe it's past 2. Wait, no, I had trouble with the 1. Anyway, who knows? But episode 2 is here. I almost did a bit after I messed up the Season 3 that I had gone back in time previously and come back here and was celebrating the fact that we did Episode 3, and I was like, oh God, just admit you're an idiot and move on.
And I swear you just did it again. You're confusing me with episodes and seasons. We're doing Season 2, Episode 3 now.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was talking about the tweet where I called it Season 3 and saying I was going to say, oh no, I came back in time to make that tweet because that was when Season 3 dropped, but I came back and it wasn't a mistake. It was time travel, because comics. So,
and you're a big Philip K. Dick fan.
I will murder you.
Oh, so hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do you tune into podcasts? What do the kids say, Charles?
I don't know. I don't have kids.
Well, I don't know. The youngins, the youngsters?
I don't know that either.
Okay. You don't hang out with a bunch of youngins?
No, not really. Not that I discuss podcasts with.
Gotcha. So, hey, again, welcome. Thanks for listening to Season 2, Episode 3. I decided to suggest that we reread the Kree Skrull War from the Avengers run back, issues number 89 and 97 from the very early 70s, because the Skrull and the Kree had come up in a bunch of different things we had read.
89 through 97, not 89 and 97.
Correct.
If you stop the podcast right there and read 89 and 97, you're going to be even more confused than I was reading all of them.
Yeah.
I read all of them.
Yeah, I did too. So, and then before we jump into Kree Skrull War, you suggested that we read collectively She-Hulk Volume 1, Law and Disorder, from way back in 2014.
Yes, way back. This is such an ancient comic I made us read. I'm surprised we were able to get through it.
Yeah, so speaking of getting through a comic, let's just jump into Kree Skrull War.
Kree Skrull War was written before Jav and I were born.
Correct. First issue, 89, was in the year of our Lord 1971, otherwise known as 1971, in June of that year. So Nixon administration, Vietnam War is still going on. Just to give I'm not trying to make excuses, just to give some historical context for when this thing was coming out, and then, of course, written ahead of that. So yeah, there's that.
You don't have to defend it just because you suggested it.
I'm defending my dissertation to you. No, I know.
I texted Jav last night. Full disclosure, I finished reading this morning. I was going to finish it last night, and I climbed into bed at about 9:15. Let's call it 9:15, because I was tired, long week, and I was like, well, I'll just finish this. I've only got, God knows, 100 and some pages left. And I started reading. I said, you know what? I'll get up tomorrow morning and finish it. And I just went to bed at 9:30. And I got up this morning and I finished it. And at one point last night, I was texting Jav things, and he said, I know. And I said, well, you did this to us.
And I think my reply was, I know.
Yeah,
I'm s-
that was exactly your. You didn't apologize. Do not apologize. Do not apologize with going with your gut. And your gut said you were going to like this, and your gut was right. Correct? You liked this, right?
um nah,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't dislike it. It's just I hate to go to this well every time. You got to take it in context. It was okay.
But
It's just a lot. Like most of these things, it was okay to good. It's just comic book of its. My big thing right off the top, Charles.
mhm.
It's just laden with misogyny and sexism
Oh my God.
all over the
Oh God.
place, like
See,
over the top.
oh no, it's I had some screenshots on I've had a number of screenshots on the misogyny and the sexism, and it is just it was bad. It really was. That isn't even the problem I had with it. Okay, whoa, that sounded bad. I don't have a problem with that. We should have more of that in comics.
I'm okay with the sexism.
I was
Let's get
okay
to what
with
I
the
really have a
sexism and
problem with.
misogyny. That's not what I had a problem with. I clearly had a problem with that, but I did take that as the, oh dear God, this is 1970. This is glaringly 1971. My problem with it is I just didn't think it was that great a comic. I don't even think I think the amount of work you would have to do to make that a good read is a lot. There's a lot. If they redid this, it could be good. There's some stuff, but it was long. It was normally when I talk about these event books, and I guess it wasn't really an event book yet because it was still a linear right in the middle of, they didn't do a whole, it's not an event, but it is kind of an event, obviously, because it's a touchstone throughout the comics that they comment on all the time as if they had done something good. And unlike a lot of these events, which I've pointed out, when they cram all this stuff together, it's not long enough. This was way too long. It took forever to get to the Kree Skrull War. I mean,
I Go
it
ahead.
was called the Kree Skrull War in like the first two issues. Got it right. And it we did not see the Kree Skrull War until what? Well, it was 89 to 97. So like 95, maybe?
For it to be called the Kree Skrull War arc from issue 89 to issue 9 issues, and then I think less than half of it really has to do with it. Well, less than half of it. It was a little look, and I suggested it because again, we had read so much about the Kree, the Skrull, and some of the stuff we had suggested to each other to read, and I had never read this, and I had read about it in other comic books for years and years, and it's revered. I feel like, or well liked, as by a lot of comic book folks that I follow on Twitter. And look, everybody's entitled to their opinion, of course. So I guess maybe I built it up in my head like this is going to be monumental and groundbreaking. And then when you get into it and then reading about it, a couple things in the look, I'll admit where I saw this on the Wikipedia page for the Kree Skrull War, the writer, so which we should mention, written by the very well regarded and great Roy Thomas, admits in some interview that he had no master plan in writing the storyline other
Duh.
than he just wanted to get some kind of galaxy-wide war between the Kree and Skrull into the comics.
Yeah.
Uh, and it shows.
At the he talked about that at the beginning of the volume we read on Hoopla.
Right.
That was in that, because he says I got nothing, and then I was really kind of saved at one point by Neal Adams, who did, in fairness, it did when he kind of got the chance to do some stuff. It was Neal Adams, right, the artist?
Yes, he did the most of the interior and the covers.
Yes, and he really when he kind of took a hand, and who's it was it Roy Thomas admits that he had a lot to do with it to make it okay. And there were some good things in it. For instance, I mentioned to you, at least there's a lot of expositional flashbacks in a text.
Yeah.
And that did sound sarcastic, right? Because, oh my Lord, the dense text on, and you remember, I mean, it was just, I from a nostalgia standpoint of reading in the 80s when they would do those little flashbacks things, I kind of enjoyed it. But when they did those in the 80s, there was a little more tongue in cheek on them. Well, of course, you know this, super fans from episode,
Ah! That's the
from
chicken.
issue, I'll choke that. Wait, I'd like to rephrase that. So it's just there was just a lot to this comic. Just real quick, I'm going to let Hav give you a quick synopsis of it because I don't think I'm capable of.
Thanks for putting that trust in me, Charles. So it starts out where Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, is
Not the hot one.
Yeah, not Carol Danvers. Who Carol
Who is in
is in this arc.
She is.
And kind of an interest of the original Captain Marvel, or there's a thing there maybe.
Well, she was a character in Captain Marvel. As kind of she was the very accomplished woman that he kept saving.
Yes.
And
so at this point in time, I never got an explanation as to why, and if you saw something in this arc, why this is the way things were. He shares time and body with Rick Jones.
I've never read any Captain Marvel other than when he's in something else, and he was pretty much dead before I even started reading comics, so it was more allusion to him and different stuff. I do know that a large part of him was that they shared time. One would be in the negative zone while the other was here. So and the nega bands, and we learned that. What was that comic you made me read?
What, Avengers Forever?
Yeah, sorry. You made me read.
I know.
I was so bitchy today.
So they trade. They're still in the situation where only one of them can be in our universe at any given time. And Marvel sees Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, in the negative zone, sees him escape the negative zone, thinks he's got a way out, gets out, and that's how you start the arc. And then it's the government pursuing Marvel, Captain Marvel, and you get all the requisite. He's an alien. Down with aliens. I'm probably skipping ahead kind of fast there. And the Avengers are involved because it's Scarlet Witch, Vision, Quicksilver tracking him down. First where he appears, and then he makes his way to Cape Canaveral. They follow him there. There's nega radiation involved where it could destroy the planet. So somehow Vision, being solar powered and hooking them up to machines, will siphon it off. And I guess that helps.
Antimatter is the word they were looking for with the negative zone. It's the anti-zone. I that's my supposition.
Yeah. So they do that, and then the Supreme Intelligence Supreme, comes into the picture. Ronan the Accuser's involved, pursuing Marvel. Yeah, I don't know. You know, and then somehow then we find out that the Skrull have started a war with the Kree, and it's a long-standing Cold War that's turned hot. And there's a line in it that I wrote down that I think was on purpose because it's an undeclared war, kind of like Vietnam was. It was a police action, for example, in the context of the Vietnam War, an undeclared war between the Kree and Skrull that turns hot, and then more hijinks ensue, and the Avengers get involved. But to the point where, and look, I'm maybe not even halfway through the arc, Charles. At some point, the Avengers, as they're constituted then, Goliath, who is Clint Barton, and Scarlet Witch and Vision get blamed for protecting Marvel. And then the big three show up, Cap, Iron Man, and Thor, and like, yeah, you guys shouldn't have protected Marvel. We're disbanding the Avengers. And you get that iconic cover of them saying, how dare y'all are done. And then there's no real explanation because then the next issue is just like, okay, the Avengers are back.
I sent that to you. I screenshot that and said, okay, I made the joke about, I guess I don't have to read this anymore. The Avengers are disbanded. You didn't get the sense right then that there was something that might not be them?
No.
Oh, okay. I did. And it turns out that the reason it just pops up with the other Avengers and all of a sudden there's things going on is you'll find out later that those were the Skrulls.
Right.
That came and caused the Avengers to disband. Although their disbanding ended up with them getting captured and Vision almost killed.
Correct.
By the cows.
And then the big three do get involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The real big three.
Because Vision shows up dead-ish. And then they do a Fantastic Voyage that was the... Oh my God, they do a whole Fantastic Voyage things where Ant-Man, who has now quit the Avengers, enters Vision microscopically.
Go ahead.
Well, that's what he does. He enters Vision microscopically. And
I'm glad you added microscopically at the end. Thank you. Go ahead.
And then he I guess he jumpstarts his brain. I mean, it was just a, hey, let's go inside Vision. And it was purely a way for them to go, hey, let's look at Vision's innards and how this works. I mean, they could have just hooked him up to a car battery and jump-started his ass.
Well, look, I will say this about that issue in particular. That is Neal Adams doing the interior.
Say this about that.
Say again?
Nothing? I was having fun with your phrasing. I will say this about that.
Thank you for that pet phrase pointing out that pet phrase.
No, that's you. You haven't said that ever, as far as I know. I just liked it. I was teasing. Oh, settle down.
Well, okay, sorry. Neal Adams, the art in that is really good. Is really cool.
Well, it really is. I will give it that was really fun art. They did a lot of things with the stuff in the Vision that makes him able to make himself intangible or make himself dense, and they did all sorts of little things with that with Hank Pym.
And it was a cool, I guess, homage, or just, it made me think of, I had to Google it because I couldn't remember the name of the movie, Fantastic Voyage from back in the 60s, I believe, where, people get shrunk down and go inside a person to try to fix them. And Inner Space is the modern kind of very loose remake of that, which is cool.
Literally every cartoon I have ever seen that has any kind of allusion to science fiction or anything, they did it in Archer. It at this point, the reason it made me laugh, and at that point it probably wasn't just this huge trope, but now it is just everybody takes their shot at it. Archer did it. They've done it in, oh dear Lord, I was just watching something recently, and now in the more meta cartoons, they at least make jokes. Oh, they did it in, I just rewatched The Venture Brothers. They did it in The Venture Brothers, which it cracks me up when I'm reading this 1971 comic and it's like, oh, now we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so this started into the zeitgeist of let's just do this at a very early time. And I got to figure that more comics did that. So.
Oh, I'm sure. And then speaking of the big three being really Skrulls when they disbanded the Avengers, you also get the now, I think, referenced often throughout the years, Skrulls in the form of cows.
Yes. Well, that was from Fantastic Four #2.
There you go.
Because that was the first time the Skrulls came along, and at the end of it, they took the 4 Skrulls, and Reed Richards hypnotized them into thinking had transformed them into cows because they can transform, and shapeshift. I guess they don't transform. That's a whole nother group of things. So they shapeshifted into cows, and he hypnotized them to thinking they were cows. Now, Neal Adams, a lot of people pointed out that at the time, Kirby, there were 4 that they shapeshifted, and then Kirby drew them in a field of 3 cows. So Neal Adams wanted to use that. So that's where the 3 came from, because they came back and there were 3 cows in the field. So this is kind of a major point. This has come back quite a bit. Matter of fact, there's a whole comic Marvel arc in the last 15 years or so that had to do with some of those cows were bred and then slaughtered and eaten, and the problems that come about from people eating Skrull meat. They did a whole thing on that, and I'm like, what the?
Okay.
There was and I forget which section, and I did not research this because I finished reading this about an hour and a half before we're doing this podcast. So at least it's fresh in my mind, because I will be trying to forget this comic for a long time.
Oh, boom, zing.
No, it really wasn't. There's some interesting stuff that has been built upon in this, and they were taking from the past and piecing a lot of things together. It probably would have been a lot better if they had gone ahead and, I don't know, planned it out before they wrote it. Do what they're doing nowadays and saying, okay, what do we want from this? Instead of, hey, here's an issue, then here's an issue, then here's an issue, then here's an issue, and then here's an issue. Maybe sit down, Roy Thomas and Neal Adams, and say, okay, where do we want to go with it? Why do we want it? And so you kind of get all these different moving parts where clearly Neal Adams thought some of this out, because they have I want to say a McCarthy type character.
Senator Craddock.
Yeah, who was put in charge of a group, and he was like, there are secret, we've learned about the Kree, and there are secret secret aliens out there, and which is funny because he's talking about it being the Kree when it's the Skrulls that are really easy. Although a lot of Kree look human.
Correct.
So they can pass pretty easy, but the Skrulls can pass for literally anyone. Literally anyone can be a Kree. Hav, anybody could be a Kree.
Okay.
Hav, anybody. You know you want to do it. I'm just
No,
Okay.
I'm not gonna do it. I don't even know what you're trying to get me to do, quite frankly. What do you mean?
anyone could be an alien. Skrull.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Anybody could be a Skrull. Oh, see, that's
Skrull.
what
Okay.
I kept saying Kree. Anyone could be a Skrull.
Yeah.
Now,
And
do you want to do it?
What, like Craddock was?
Yeah, like crud. There it is.
Well, and I'm wondering if that was planned. Speaking of whether or not they had this planned out, I'm wondering if when they started Craddock being the Senator McCarthy, Red Menace, hunting down the aliens, if they knew they were going to make him a Skrull at the end.
I'm not 100% sure because if you read the little blurb from Neal Adams that he wrote in 2000 at the end of this, he did say he wanted to use the fact that there were 4 originally, and then there were 3 in the field, and a lot of people remembered that. And he decided, at some point, that, well, there's a 4th one out there somewhere, Skrull out there that's been living on Earth for a while, and they decided to have him right before all of this started, he took over the Senator, Craddock, and became him to rabble rouse, and he ends up getting killed at the end because super evolved humanoid
Rick Jones.
No, I wasn't going to name him, but yeah, super evolved humanoid Rick Jones causes him to turn back into a Kree, and he's already roused that rabble.
Turn into a Skrull.
Yeah, turns him back into a Skrull. He didn't turn him into a Skrull. Showed him for what he is.
Correct.
And then they killed him because the mob just murdered him. And then Rick Jones is, I killed him. It's as if I did it. It's like, yeah, he kind of did it to himself.
Yeah, but they do just bludgeon him to death in the middle of the street.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Which is, since they were going down that, bluntly, some of the stuff I found interesting were they were trying to show fascism as bad, which is because the othering and the what have you that Craddock was doing was that. But then when you go on the other end, they were still doing fascist stuff, but not realizing it was fascist stuff. Because the whole thing, just to push us all the way forward, the whole way this ends is that the magic ghost of the Kree,
the Supreme Intelligence Supreme.
Magic Ghost, evolves Rick Jones and gives him the cosmic power. And This is something that he explains that humans will eventually evolve to, all humans. He could have done this to any particular human because of the heights of evolution that the human race can become. And that's why the Skrull and the Kree, who have reached their evolutionary apex and will never evolve further than this, hate, even though they don't know this is the reason, it's why they hate Earth. And it's not because Earth sits in between the two places, it's because we're innately better than they are. And that, my friend, is incredibly fascist.
Self-serving fascist. It's also, was there any foreshadowing at all that you remember, since you read this a lot more recently than me, that's where all this was headed in that last issue, I think, really, or 2?
I only knew that it was headed to there because we read Avengers Forever. Yeah. And it told us all of this in its less dense flashback expositions.
Well, and the reason I point that out is because it very much made me think of the literary plot device of, and I don't know how to say because I've only read it, Do Ex Machina, Ex Machina,
yeah,
where it's just a plot device used to solve the problem.
The Ghost in the Machine. Yeah, I mean, this is literally the Ghost in the Machine.
Just to fix here, we got this big issue, this big problem, and there's no real way laid out so far to fix it. But here's how we're going to, very Star Trek-y, where, okay, if we just, decouple the phase inducers, we can tractor beam the thing away and save the planet. And it's, just makes up something at the very end. So there's that. And then before, yeah. So that's how so Rick Jones gets evolved by the Supreme Intelligence, stops the Kree Skrull War, and then is comatose? Is that how we leave him?
No, that's not how we leave him. He's dead.
Okay.
But we don't leave him there. He dies. Right. And he's lying dead. And
then Captain Marvel.
And then Captain Marvel enters him.
Right.
Because
trade places or whatever.
He needs his life force to be alive again. And then they go back to sharing an existence, one in the negative zone and one in Earth. bluntly, if I gave a crap, I would have to do some reading about the difference between the microverse from the Fantastic Four and the negative zone of this, but I don't see me doing that.
Speaking of the negative zone, Annihilus is there in the
Yes.
beginning, and there's
And at the end.
Go ahead.
And at the end.
And at the end,
Yes.
but
Your
not really in the
favorite
middle.
character. Well, they're not in the negative zone in the middle. They banish
Yeah.
him at the beginning, and then Rick Jones ends up back there. The Supreme Intelligence throws him into the negative zone when he evolves him. Part of his evolution was throwing him there, and Annihilus almost killing Rick Jones causes him to use the power of his mind to blast him away. And then he uses the power of his mind to save himself from a part of the negative zone that will make him disappear. And then he comes back and then uses his power to stop the war.
And brings back some Golden Age heroes that he imagines. The Supreme Intelligence is encouraging him to remember the comics he read as a kid, and he brings back. And I made a point of jotting some of these down.
Are they real? I mean, I know Namor and the Human Torch and Captain America are
flaming
not real, as in were actually.
I think so, maybe. I don't know.
I'd be curious. That one I did. I was looking at that going, now that, if I'd had time, I might have researched.
The Flaming Skull is one of them. The Angel is... I think they were Golden Age Marvel heroes, maybe. The Angel was one of them.
All of which, almost every one of those was mined, just like the Human Torch, for further characters. Because we have Angel, we have a Flaming Skull in...
Blazing Skulls, I think, maybe. Sorry.
Okay. But in, the Demon Rider?
Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider, yeah.
And then the Patriot.
That's right. He rides demons when he catches them.
There you go.
He rides demons down.
He hunts them down.
He enters demons? No, wait.
No.
Microscopically?
No. He punishes bad people and sends them to hell, I think, or something. I don't know. Oh, and we skipped the whole part where they go to what I thought at first was going to be the Savage Land, but isn't. That tropical zone in the Antarctic or Arctic, and they de-evolve Hank Pym.
Yes, and immediately when he captures her, he smacks
Janet.
Van I mean, what the hell? Fairness, at least he was a troglodyte when he did it, but good Lord, he is just a wife abuser.
Yeah, well, that comes up again, right? And then speaking of, so segueing into the sexism, misogyny, the lines I wrote down, I think Pietro Quicksilver's talking to his sister about a woman's hysterical fantasy.
Yes.
There's another line somewhere about talking about your male betters.
I mean, there was that where those happened in the exact same.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just we're gonna show you. Hold on.
And then Goliath, Clint Barton, who's now the giant man Goliath at the time, can't get the chicks out of his head, man. He's thinking about his ex-flame, Black Widow, and then he's thinking about Scarlet Witch, and because he's got women on the brain. He's got to concentrate. Game face. Yeah. So there's that. Oh, and speaking of just jumping around a lot here, because you're right about them going back and they go through the whole thing of the Inhumans and who the Inhumans are, and Black Bolt, and Triton makes an appearance to help Warren and the Avengers. So. All that to culminate with the Supreme Intelligence evolving Rick Jones and solving everything in 2 pages?
Oh yeah, pretty much. There were some actually great old comic-y things though. There is a picture of a Skrull I took a screenshot of, and he's saying, "No, my ship is built to withstand ethereal winds, the light storms of hyperspace, but not the sheer impact of a giant hammering fist."
Boom.
Wait, what? That cracked me up.
Yep.
And then phrases like this is true old comic genius. Thus do brave men jest when death turns tail and flees, and thus ends perhaps the strangest rescue mission in history. Yet it may well be that this has been but a paltry prologue to the most pretentious Avengers saga of all. That was that was as Hank Pym is coming out of the throat instead of coming into the throat, coming out of the throat of.
Wow, you're just leaning into that, aren't you?
Well, and I mean. You can see his epiglottis. Is that the little thing that hangs at the back right there?
Or oblongata, what is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Thing in the back of your throat.
Yes.
And then some of the screenshots.
Someone can email and correct us at havandcharlestalkcomics@gmail.com. havandcharlestalkcomics@gmail.com. The only place that we will accept corrections to the podcast.
And maybe we'll talk about it
Oh,
next.
we will absolutely, guaranteed, unless requested not to, read the email on the pod.
And if Charles tells me we get an email, I will again get genuinely excited
I
until he
didn't
tells me.
I didn't tell you today about it because you sent me the email with the screenshots that you
I know.
took. So
I
I
know.
did not tell you, hey, we got an email. So I didn't want you to go squeak.
Yay! Oh, and then be let down.
Yeah.
As speaking of screenshots, I sent you some screenshots, of course, and one of them I sent you was just of Quicksilver. And what the main big takeaway from this arc also regarding Quicksilver is, yeah, he's fast, but that's pretty much it. Because I don't know that he contributes a darn thing at any point. I mean, there's the screenshot I sent you is when he's trying to take down the Kree sentry, and then the sentry just kind of smacks him to the side.
Well, the Kree
Like,
Sentry has evaluated all of their powers and pretty much can smack any of them to his side. I will give you some on that because he did better in other places. But yes, they've developed the character a little better since then. One of the ones I took was the Avengers are fighting the mandroids that Tony Stark invented, and Iron Man is there, and they don't understand why Iron Man knows how to stop them. Because at this point, no one in the Avengers knows that Tony Stark is Iron Man. He just works for Tony Stark. I mean, he could have just said, I work for Tony Stark. Tony Stark told me how to deal with them. But instead, he's just like, oh, don't worry about it. But the way he stops them is the fact that he has roller skates. All of you forgot I have roller skates.
yeah,
Iron Man has roller skates. I had forgotten he had. I actually knew that at one point because I had seen something where they did something that I'm going to do, which is make fun of the fact that Iron Man has roller skates.
well, when you're going to outfit a suit of armor, man, like number one on the list is roller skates,
I mean, and that's why he can defeat the mandroids is because he's on roller skates.
which seems like a pretty bad design flaw in the
Right?
androids.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna build in a flaw, which he did, and he said, I'm
Yeah.
gonna build in a flaw, but what's something that it's gonna be really weird? It's gonna be really weird. It's not gonna be that common, and it's something I have that most people don't have at hand. Roller skates.
Boom. Sure, why not? Other screenshots I took and forwarded you. So when the Avengers, I'm just being negative about this. I'm sorry. When the B team Avengers of Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Vision are taken captive, that you have the very awkward scene. Oh, because there's foreshadowing too to this, where there's something going on between Vision and Scarlet Witch. There's a blossoming
Oh, yeah.
something,
Well,
romance,
they worked
affection.
that forever. And the reason they were able to do that and develop the characters the way they did is because the only place that Vision and the Scarlet Witch occurred was in Avengers. They didn't have
Right.
their own book, so they could do whatever they wanted with the two of them because it wouldn't affect anything else. The weird thing about that is Quicksilver doesn't exist anywhere else, and he stayed. They didn't develop him in any way whatsoever.
That's a good point.
I mean, he's just Quicksilver. The best thing that Fox did is make Quicksilver a thing
yeah. That's a good
because
point.
they made him amazing, and then he's gone, and the other one's dead. That sucks because they have this great character that they're like, okay, now we've gotten something that we can do, and now it's just gone. So
Yeah, there's a great scene in Days of Future Past that I just adored and loved when it was like, to me, one of the highlights, if not the highlight of that movie.
Yes, in the kitchen when they're going
Yeah.
to, yes, that is the greatest scene in possibly every one of those X-Men movies.
So well done. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So just going back to the awkward screenshot I sent you of them about to kiss, and it is kind of cringy.
We both took, I told you, I may have even said this on the phone, we both took the same screenshot.
Yeah.
I have it too. It is horrible. And I hope I will remember to tweet this out when we drop this podcast, or at least get the unpaid intern to tweet this out.
Yes, please
Oh
do.
my Lord.
I am being really negative about this
As well you should be.
just because, again, not to beat a
It
dead
wasn't
horse,
very good.
but I'm kind of, because it was so built up in my mind, given how much it is so often referenced in a lot of the comic books I read as a kiddo in the 80s and onward. and just really well regarded. And then I know you were saying Neal Adams, he did a good job. He did a great job.
He did.
Also, pencilers on some of the earlier issues in the arc were the brothers Sal and John Buscema, who are two of my favorites, especially John, because he was the penciler. They called it breakdowns, and Tom Palmer, who was the inker on a lot of these, in the run of Avengers, I cut my teeth on reading back in the 80s. And Neal Adams is really well regarded and good. I just, for some reason, I've always thought, and look, I know he's good. It's one of those things where I appreciate Neal Adams, kind of like I appreciate Bruce Springsteen, but I'm not a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. I appreciate Neal Adams. It's just, to me, it's very comic book art, not very distinctive to me. And that's my bag, I guess, I get it. He is great.
I get it. You don't like Jack Kirby.
No, that's your thing.
No,
I don't want to take your thing.
I'm pretty sure that's what you were trying to say there, because there's a lot of Kirby in Neal Adams.
Well, that's one of the things I sent you was the Kirby Crackle in one of them. One of the first things that may not have been, that issue may have been one of the Buscema brothers, where Rick Jones is diving into the Thing in the negative zone, or trying to get out of the negative zone, and you got the Kirby Crackle going all over the place, and that is used throughout this arc, the Kirby Crackle, for sure. So Neal Adams is great. I do get why he's well regarded.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of other comic book artists back there, including Sal and John Buscema, who don't get nearly as much credit as he does for being, I think, equally as great. Maybe that's my big takeaway.
Well, I think a lot of the Neal Adams thing is the writing stuff he does as well.
That's true. Or plot development.
Well, plotting is writing.
Right. I get you.
Even if it's pre-writing, it's still, plotting is an incredibly important part of writing anything. Lord knows this whole arc could have really used some pre-plotting. So.
Well, and also, let me also say this. Neal Adams has some of the most iconic comic book covers out there. I mean, the one from this run where it's the Avengers, the big three banishing the Vision, Scarlet Witch, Goliath, and Vision. He's got the one for Batman back in the day where it's a huge Joker with Batman on the playing card. He's got the one, what's the other one? Superman busting the chains. He's got a lot of iconic, like I said, just really well-known comic book covers, because he is great. I think I'm going to kind of go back on what I said a little bit. He is great. I hate that.
You hate him.
Again, John Buscema and Sal Buscema, I don't feel like get as much, talk. They're not talked about as much in the same vein or being on the same level, which I think they are. Okay. So there you go. Just because I sometimes do a good job. We sometimes do a good job of this. Sometimes we don't. Written by Roy Thomas.
Said that. We did all of that.
We did all that stuff.
Yes, and then you just talked about the artists for like
I sure did.
15 minutes.
Okay.
At least it seemed. I'm sorry.
Did I bore you to tears?
First you hate him, then you like him, but then you think that other people deserve more credit than he does. Then you're like, well, maybe not at more credit, but at least as much credit. You were all over the place.
So you just don't want me to talk through my feelings with you, Charles, is what you're trying to say. I guess
you're
this
welcome.
isn't a safe. I thought this was a safe place.
I do not know what ever gave you that idea.
Oh, so yeah.
I am not your therapist, but no. If you truly need to talk about your feelings with me, I am very happy to listen.
I meant my feelings about Neal Adams.
Oh,
you know what I was getting to.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if you want to open this up to some other problems you're having in your life, I'm sure no one would mind listening.
I was talking to how I felt about Neal Adams.
I know.
It took me about 3 days to get through it.
You went a long way around on that. But I do love how you came back to, oh, wait, I said I might not really like someone that's an icon of the genre. I had better backtrack and find a reason why I actually like him. Stick to your guns, brother. Come on.
Anyways, so yeah, that was a Chris.
Are you gonna watch your favorite movie, Dark Phoenix, today?
Am I gonna try again?
There's also, and I don't know, there was also another great scene of Quicksilver in those movies. It was the one where he rescues all the mutants out of the mansion before it gets blown up, and I don't remember, was that, it was the movie with, What is the name of that? Apocalypse?
Is that I was going to say, is it Apocalypse?
It's
I think
Age
it
of
must
Apocalypse.
be.
I think it's Age of Apocalypse because it's the only
Okay.
good thing in that movie. Well, I mean, it's not the only good thing, but that wasn't a great movie. But that scene is amazing for just the same reasons the scene from Days of Future Past was amazing. It's just like, oh my gosh, let's do this stop screen thing. I enjoy that when they've done limited things like that on the Flash TV show. They'll do stuff like that sometimes, but not at the same. And I don't. I love that. I'm hoping the Flash movie will do stuff like that.
Oh, I hope so. God, I'd be surprised.
I'm also
if they-
hoping the Flash movie will be good, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
I'm hoping the Flash movie is just really Michael Keaton being Batman again. That's all I want.
Okay.
So,
All right. That's
selfishly.
fine.
Anything else that you feel you need to pick on me about regarding Kree Skrull War?
I feel I have been nothing but nice to you about this.
You have been. I
I wanna-
kid.
I want to be perfectly clear. That was difficult to read. It was just so dense. Really, I joke sometimes about they're just picture books, Hav, but there was a lot of dense text it wasn't exactly smooth reading prose here. This was something you had to chew through. And it's like, oh my goodness. There were a number of places where I was reading stuff and I was mentally editing it in my mind because there'd be phrases going down the page and I'm like, well, you just said that in a different way up here. And you say, I mean, it's just the same character's just repeating himself in another way. And I'm like, you could have picked one of those, or, and here's a better idea, you could have rewritten what he was saying and said it shorter and more pithy and better and just had one little speech bubble because it was just over and over. I think I gotta find that one I sent to you earlier, or last night I sent you this. It is Goliath has arrived, and he says, "This is your 10-foot Toreador talking at your crew. Just got a call from Janet Pym, Hank's ever-loving spouse, otherwise known as the Wonderful Wasp. Didn't get it all, but seems there's trouble brewing up in Alaska where she and Hank are. So I'm off for the big ice box and hoping the rest of you are too far behind. This sounds big, over and out." I emailed that to you with the phrase, "What the fuck?"
He's trying to tell him what's going on, man, and the reader. Here's the skinny. He's
hip, he's cool, he's 45.
There is a lot of usage of hip, cool phrases by
Oh
Rick
my
Jones.
Lord.
That's another thing, which is he makes a reference to the Green Bay Packers because what's his face, Quicksilver throws something super fast. He's like, "That's great, and you could be a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers." 42 skidoo. And there's all sorts, and he's always calling Quicksilver Quickie.
Yes.
And,
oh yeah, they're trying to make a nickname.
And he's the snapper car of the Avengers, sure. And he's got to be he's the conduit for the kiddos, so that they can relate to the Avengers. And yeah, okay, I know look, they've obviously used a lot of what happened in this thing over and over again in different iterations. The Secret Invasion, for example, there would not be Secret Invasion without this, which the MCU apparently is going to use heavily coming up, from what I can tell, or something. There's going to be a show or something.
Well, I have no problem with them updating this. I think that'll be fine. I'm looking forward to Secret Invasion personally.
Me too. I also like that,
and I'm hoping we get Spider-Woman, but we're not going to.
You never know. You never know. I was going to say, the also cool thing I thought was that Ronan the Accuser,
yes,
is
in it.
Well, for the MCU version of Ronan the Accuser, kind of pretty spot on take of him in the MCU from the comics.
Yes,
is very plain to see, which is kind of neat that they're not trying to retool the look and the backstory. Is just, no, this guy's an ass, and this is how he looks. Deal with it. And he looks different than a lot of the other Kree, or if not all the other Kree, and we're not going to really explain it. It's just his bag. This is what he does. This is his garb, and he's a zealot, and that's all you need to know. Roll with it, and I kind of dig that.
Yeah, no, that was good. Of course, they kind of one-tricked Pony Ronan, and I mean they brought him back in Captain Marvel, but he was barely there, and then they killed him at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's not like they didn't really have to go deep into character development with him. They were just like, nope, you're here, you're gonna do this. You're going to lead us to the point where Thanos says, "Fuck this, I'll do it myself," and off we go.
Yep, pretty much. Any other big notes or takeaways? I know you didn't take notes, but
I feel personally attacked. You trying to get my notes out of me
because I'm showing off my notes. Look at all the notes.
I see them. Good for you.
Because my memory is for the doo-doo.
That and lawyers take notes.
That is true. Well, speaking of lawyers,
See what I did there?
yeah, you're good. Speaking of lawyers, you suggested we read She-Hulk Volume 1 Law and Disorder.
Mm-hmm.
That was published originally in the year 2014.
Okay, I was like, no, it's not that old.
And we meet She-Hulk, also known as Jennifer Walters, and she is working at a big firm. But
Yes.
I'll let you. It was your suggestion, so if you want to give everybody a brief kind of 101 of what we're walking into here.
Brief 101 of what we're working into. She-Hulk is a cousin of Bruce Banner. She was shot by mobsters while Bruce Banner was around, and he did not. At that point, his Hulk powers were diminished somehow, so he did not think he was the Hulk. She needed a blood transfusion, so he gave it to her because he was family and it would work, and because of that, she became She-Hulk. She-Hulk has never been the raging Hulk the way the Hulk was. They did do a much more recent arc in the last couple of years where she did become that, because during Civil War II, she almost died. And by almost died, she was in a coma for a long time. When she came out of that, she had some real Hulk things going on. But in this, she's pretty much Hulk almost all the time. She's very rarely Jennifer Walters. She's almost always She-Hulk, which is, to me, an interesting aspect of that character. She's decided, hey, I can be this strong, sexy, green. That's right. I said sexy. She-Hulk is sexy. And I can be this all the time. Why wouldn't I be? Ain't nobody going to mess with She-Hulk. So she's working at a big firm. She goes in for her performance review, knowing she is going to get a kick-ass bonus, and she's bucking for maybe a raise, and they tell her that what she did wasn't good enough because they really just wanted her to bring in business because she's She-Hulk, and where are all these superheroes and Tony Stark and all these people that she knows, and why the hell can't she be that? So she quits, or they fire her. I can't quite remember which way it went. It seemed to be one of those mutual...
Yeah, it's just a big. I think what I texted you was, I sent you the screenshot of the one of the scenes when she's going into the review with the partners because she's not a partner.
Yeah,
thinking she's billed over 3,000 hours. Which, if you do the math on billing over 2,800 or 3,000 hours, the lawyers that work at these big law firms they live, breathe, eat, sleep their job. And look, I full disclosure, in case y'all haven't picked up on this, my day job is a lawyer. I've never worked at one of those big firms. My lovely, beautiful wife has worked at some of those big downtown law firms. Not to overshare, I'm not going to say which, but and look, she had an okay to great experience at most of them, if not all of them. It's just they demand a lot of time, and then you think, well, how about something for the effort? And here's the thing: at those firms, there's a finite amount of partners, and then each of those partners have associates that are feeding the firm and feeding the partners. I called the screenshot I sent you big law firm pyramid scheme because not every associate's going to make partner. It's just numbers. And you can have associates that kill themselves billing. So when I saw this, it just really struck a chord like, oh my God, yeah, that happens. You can do everything you're expected to do and them tell you, thanks for the effort. Do it again.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she quits or they fire her.
Well, in fairness, what they were telling her is they didn't bring her on board to bill. They brought her on board to end up as a partner, because if she starts bringing in Tony Stark and that kind of contact as her account, they're almost going to have to make her a partner.
Which goes to the other thing that they don't tell you about maybe in law school, that, yeah, doing the legal part of it is one thing, but also developing business, getting clients, ongoing clients, that quote unquote, being a rainmaker.
That's how you become a partner, or at least an equity partner.
Yeah. And then what you have happen, though, is, okay, if you're doing that and you're bringing in all this business, why am I going to share? Mm-hmm. So... Anyway, so that's going down that little tangent of the legal side of it. But so she quits. She hangs her own shingle, as they say in the legal business. She starts her own office in
Dumbo.
And what?
In Dumbo.
In Dumbo?
Yeah, down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass.
That's right. That's
right.
That,
Dumbo. Down. Yeah. I got that right. Right down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass.
I think you're right.
Yeah. I really like this because she chooses a building that is run by a former superhero that it no longer has powers
because of M Day.
Yeah, and and it's all powered people in that. So everybody in that building is powered, and because she says when She-Hulk was asking, she's like, well, I know the problems with doing this kind of stuff. You kind of have to, you need a safe place, and most buildings won't lease to people like us because things happen. And so it's a kind of a fun environment that that continues with some other people. I think at one point when Hellcat, there's a Hellcat arc, and she puts out her shingle because Hellcat's in this. She's going to do some investigation for She-Hulk, and she puts her shingle in that building, and it's a lot of it. The whole point of this was it's a fun comic, and there's going to be a She-Hulk show, so I wanted to read some She-Hulk because I think I've mentioned I used to read She-Hulk as a kid. I just like the character.
I was going to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this comic book to the point where when I was done, and we'll get there eventually, because of the way it ended, I immediately borrowed the next volume, just immediately. And then going back to what you're saying, growing up, I was first introduced to She-Hulk really in Fantastic Four when John Byrne was on it.
Me too.
Loved her in that. Then she was in the Avengers there for a little while.
Wasn't it West Coast Avengers?
No, she was in Avengers proper.
Okay, so that was when I was reading a little bit of Avengers, was when She-Hulk was in it.
Yeah.
So I read right after. Except I think I read. Didn't she have her own book? I may have read some of her own book. I was going to say she did. The Sensational She-Hulk, also by John Byrne, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Which was where in that she's breaking the fourth wall a lot, and way before Deadpool's doing it. And I remember thoroughly enjoying that and I didn't read the whole run. It wasn't a short run, but it wasn't a 100-issue run either. Yeah. But it was a few dozen issues, I want to say. I might be just completely making that up. But yeah. She's a fun character.
Yes.
I mean, everything about her is just fun. I pulled up one of the screenshots you have here, which was one of my favorite scenes in it. In this issue, she's talking to, I believe it's the Shocker. And one of the things I noticed about the art in this is they did not draw these characters to be comic book good looking. They went for, it's still comic booky art, but it's also a more realistic facial structure of people. So in this one in particular, she's talking to him, and it's a great thing because she's talking to the Shocker and she's saying, there's only one Thor. And Shocker's like, nah, lots. The fat one with the red beard, the hot blonde gal, that weird one with the horse face. Those guys aren't Thors. That's Volstagg and Valkyrie. And yep, Thors. Trust me, they're all Thors.
Right.
But they're even so she's not this gorgeous She-Hulk in this. And she's also not, when she turns into Jen Walters, she's not this gorgeous sexy. She's an attractive woman, don't get me, but you know what you get what I'm saying on the way they draw characters sometimes of these. Just say, let's try to make a perfect physical specimen.
Yeah, where they accentuate certain
let's go for true beauty. And I'm not even talking about the hey, let's give them a woman large breasts. I'm talking about even just in the face. Let's go for perfect classical beauty on every character.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I like sometimes the more realistic art.
Well, and I did thoroughly enjoy the art in this. Javier Pulido did the art early on, and then you can tell in the arc there is a switch in artists, and it's just different. It's still cool. In the last few issues of this arc, and I'm struggling to find who did the last few, I think anyway. Anyways, I feel like they switched up artists towards the end. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be absolutely wrong about this. So, anyways, because you can tell that one screenshot I sent you of her sitting down with Shocker, that art I think is distinctive and different.
Oh yeah, it's completely different.
It reminded me of art from Bitterroot.
Yeah, that's absolutely, that is very, very much like Bitterroot. Yeah, the other art is more comic book art that we're used to, but it's also not got the same. It's still good with the features on the characters. It's drawing more realistic looking characters. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, and the change up in the art, Ronald Wimberley did some of the art in this arc. Okay. By the way, just want to give credit where credit is due, because very different, very still very cool art in this.
So she leaves her firm. She gets her own firm. She takes one file with her. That's it. She doesn't take
the blue file.
the blue file. She takes the blue file, and it turns out what this is it is the reason she has it and she's working on it is she is a party to a lawsuit that she has no remembrance of, with something going on that she has no idea what it is, and that's literally all we know. And then so that's going to start. She's going to start looking into that. She's also hires a secretary, a paralegal, who has a monkey. And clearly has the power of hypnosis over people.
Right.
Which I think is why she gives her the job, because I'm going to, and then the next thing, okay, and you're hired. And she does that throughout just places, including later on when she's in court. They're in court, and she has her monkey with her in court, and the bailiff is all, well, excuse me, ma'am, you're not allowed to have a monkey in here, and she's like, oh no, I can have this monkey in here.
Total, I sent you the screenshot.
Yeah. Total Jedi mind tricked him.
That's exactly what I labeled it.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't allow animals in the courtroom. How'd you even get that thing past security? But you'll allow this one, won't you? Huh? You know what? Now that you mentioned it, I sure will.
Boom. Done. Yeah, definitely powered. And I guess, shoot, I'm going to spoil it. So speaking of the blue file, we actually do know a little bit more, just to point out. Jennifer Walters, a.k.a. She-Hulk, is a named defendant, along with the Shocker, Tigra, White Wingfoot, Monica Rambeau, formerly Captain Marvel, and leader of the Avengers from the run I love in the 80s, and some guy, Kevin something, who was the Night Stalker or Night Watchman or something, who I'd never heard of before. And the reason why it's all frustrating is because the little she's found, she apparently was served with this lawsuit, but then it was transferred, or venue was moved to North Dakota, I think, or South Dakota. I think it's North Dakota. And she doesn't remember any of this. And apparently nobody else does. And so she employs Patsy Walker Hellcat to help. And Patsy goes in and is talking to Tigra, mentions the name of the plaintiff, who for some reason I didn't write down. And when she mentions his name, Tigra goes crazy and attacks Patsy.
And a sexy fight entails. Okay, it wasn't that sexy.
No, it was kind of dropped. It was just vicious.
But I mean, we did get a cat fight.
Oh my God, holy crap. I didn't even pick up on that. We literally got a cat fight.
It was a literal cat fight. Tigra and Hellcat fought.
I say Tigra. You say Tigra?
Yeah, okay. I like Tigger.
Yeah, okay. Fair.
Most wonderful things about tigers is I'm the only one. Tigra. It probably is Tigra. I don't pronounce things well.
Yeah, well, I get it before. In my head. I said Magneto for years until I heard it said in the cartoon. Instead of Magneto. Oh, she gets another case she's hanging out in a quote-unquote lawyer bar after she's gone out on her own, and she gets a client that wants her to look into some patent thing.
That was one of the most fun things in this, among other fun things, is the true look at how corporations handle lawsuits. Because that right there was how a corporation handles a lawsuit. Because it turns out that the case was a patent theft from Tony Stark's company. And she knows Tony Stark. Let me say this correctly. She knows Tony Stark.
Yeah. They have history.
Yes, they have. No, they have history. So she goes to, she says, oh, this will just be a conversation with me and Tony. So she goes, and then she gets shunted to legal.
A dude literally just named Legal.
His name is Legal. And then she gets kicked out, and then the battle ensues in court, where he shows up with all the lawyers and has motion after motion after motion, including trying to get her off of it because of the relationship between she and Tony Stark, and the fact that Stark Industries is not Stark Industries. It was actually shunted to it is a whole. You sent a screenshot on that, didn't you?
I did, because I labeled it legal entities who to sue. Ugh, because I have, you need to sue the right entity. Yeah. Yes. And he goes through this huge.
We're moving for summary judgments, change of venue, extensions on multiple grounds, countersuit based on tortious interference, and among other things, alleging that Miss Walters is not competent to serve as counsel in this matter due to her relationship with my client, Mr. Stark, a point you yourself noted, Your Honor.
And then he's got an army of lawyers behind him with stacks and stacks and reams of stuff that's just going to overwhelm them with paper, which happens all the time. You've seen it in like the movie speaking of Rainmakers, in Rainmaker with Matt Damon, where he's a little guy going up against the big insurance company, or class action movie with John Travolta or whatever.
It happens all the time. They do that. They have the money to drag it out until the other side just quits.
Gets worn down.
Yeah. And can't afford to keep doing it.
before that scene in the courtroom, it's when legal on the 18th floor is going through it with her with, well, yes, it matters which entity you sue. Let me tell you about the history of Stark Industries. And then it's a huge, speaking of dense, this is one of the only dense things. He goes through the history of Stark Industries.
That was what I was, that was what I was alluding to about that is, well, no, it could be Stark, and then it went bankrupt, and then it was bought out by this, and then...
Stark Industries, Stark International, Stain International, Fujikawa Industries, an Asian concern, Stark Fujikawa, Stark was dead, then comes back to life, German GmbH, a Cayman Islands Limited Partnership. Oh my God. And so much so that she said, forget it. I'll see you in court.
Yeah.
And then the court scene happens.
Then she does see them in court.
And then they do the warehouse thing or the storage unit thing, which I have been in storage units in warehouses where there's stacks of paper you got to go through. Unfortunately, I've never found the smoking gun. She finds a smoking gun of a tape recording where it's clear this lady's now dead husband did have his great technological patent idea stolen by some entity controlled, owned by Tony Stark. And then she does fast forward.
She finally manages to get in to see Tony. And she was right. It took a conversation.
Which sometimes it just does.
Well, if you do know the right person, sometimes the conversation is all you have to have, which was come on, man, you did it. She's not asking for the world here. She just wants what's owed her for y'all stealing a massive patent from your husband. And the thing is, with the smoking gun, what Tony has to understand is she would eventually win this.
Eventually, but like she says, it could take years and thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses.
Yes.
But you could short circuit it now, and that's what gets to happen in this situation. Because
is your favorite line from the outtakes of Winter Soldier? Cut the check.
Cut the check. Love that.
Well, the reason I know about it is because you talked about that. And then at the end of that, he goes, cut the check.
So, yeah, that's the first part of this. And so, she mentions how much money Stark Industries has made. And I forget, but I want to say it was like $250 million.
Oh, it's a huge amount. Well, it's an integral part of everything Stark does.
It's a repulsor. It's some kind of repulsor technology.
It makes Iron Man work.
Yeah.
It was definitely something that if he took that, if somebody, and I loved his, well, Obadiah Stane, wasn't it Obadiah Stane? Obadiah Stane, speaking of old characters, he's the one that did it. Because he does try that tact. Well, Obadiah Stane did it.
And he hired some guy that was a ne'er-do-well, that's no longer with the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was somebody else's fault. Your name's on the company there, buddy.
Right.
You're the one that is benefiting from the theft, therefore you are responsible for it.
I'm trying to think if there's then at the end, a little thing that, so I remembered for some reason the number being thrown around that that patent, that technology generated, I want to say, over $200 million at least for Stark Industry entities or Stark's entities. But then at the end, she's at the bar, and now the now ex-client shows up dressed a little nicer with some nicer jewelry on and says, "Hey, I never paid you. Here you go." And I'm curious how much money the client got, because she gives her a check for $150,000, which, depending on how much, I mean, if she's billing by the hour, I get it. But if she got her $250 million and she only gives her $150,000, I'm like, what's going on here?
She didn't get her $250 million.
Do they ever say how much?
Well, no, they don't say how much she got, but you're not getting on that kind of settlement. If it made the company $250 million, you're not getting that $250 million.
I agree.
I mean, you are an attorney here. Yeah,
I'm guessing. I know, but I'm guessing it's in the millions of dollars is what I'm getting at.
Well, wasn't also the point of that is she told her she didn't want any of the money?
I think she did some.
She did. So this $150,000 was the woman coming back and saying, "I have to give you something. So here's $150,000."
Yeah.
And if you're billing by the hour, that's a huge amount of money.
That's true, and that's the difference going down that little contingency versus by the hour.
It's not going to be 30%, but it's look, I have to give you something. Here's $150,000. And my guess is it was in the million range, but it would be single-digit millions is what he did, because it's just, look, we have to do something. You have to do something. Cut a check.
Money.
Yeah.
Walk-away money.
Give her enough money that she'll be fine. You never know. I mean, if I were doing a settlement like that, I'm like, okay, how about you cut a check for a little bit of money here, but we also agree that it was stolen, and you start giving royalties on top of this at a percentage, and that comes in. Or maybe you just say, hey, maybe we just do royalties.
Yeah.
Kick some back. So here, give the what's a small sliver, give the back, and then continue to pay.
Or like that brilliant. Okay, dude, this is a weird tangent, dude. So I'm sorry.
I can't believe we're discussing legal settlements to this point, though. I mean, legitimately, we're just having. I don't know how many people have tuned out at this point because you're a lawyer, and for some reason, I seem to like legal crap.
It's interesting.
Yes. So we're discussing how we could set up a.
Well, and if anybody wants to fast forward or whatever, but I was going to mention when the ABA was getting absorbed into the NBA. Remember those 3 franchises that went away, and one of them just took some money, but like some of them were taking a percentage of the TV contracts into perpetuity. Mm-hmm. And there's these brothers that did that for like the Kansas City something, I forget what franchise.
Yes.
Where their yearly takeaway for doing absolutely nothing started out as hundreds of thousands of dollars, turned into millions of dollars, turned into way more than that. And I forget the whole story, but it is a fascinating read.
Wasn't it a cut of not the whole of the NBA, but of the teams that made it over?
Yes, I think you're right.
Of the ABA teams that made it over,
yes.
One of which wasn't it the Spurs? Was the Spurs over?
Yeah. The Spurs were
so
an
the
ABA
Spurs,
team.
And didn't they eventually buy that? They finally bought them out?
I think something
I mean,
like that.
And it was a big check, because that's when, because they were, No, that was fascinating. That was well thought out. No, we want perpetual income.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting read for those of you that like this bunny trail we're going on.
It was fascinating. I read that back a number of years ago too.
Yeah. So, and of course I can't find out who the heck, it was 2 brothers.
It's
remember.
Okay. It's okay.
So yeah, and there's other stories like that, especially in sports. There's other stories like that. Prince Fielder did something.
That was who I was going to say. He gets $1 million a year or some ridiculous amount every.
Not King Fielder, the one that was in the Ranger, but his dad, Prince Fielder, and then another one like Bobby Bonilla did something like that too.
Yeah, there's one that it's just every year they get some obscene amount of money just because they've drawn out this. They were like, well, we want out of this kind. Well, okay, then you can do me this for. It may not be $1 million, but it is a chunk of money. Just literally.
I want to say it is 7 figures.
I think that has a time limit on it, though. I do think it's not a forever thing, but it is a long. It went on. If it's still going on, it went on for a long time. No, some people, it's the sad thing. If you have the right lawyer, you come out ahead over a corporation. But most people don't have and they have good lawyers, but the corporation has so many lawyers that we don't win things. That's okay. I'm not going to go down my whole what's wrong with our legal system.
So I'm drawing you so far off sides on this. Man. I'm sorry, everybody.
No. You're fine because I could go on a rant.
So just so everybody knows, in case so you don't have trouble Googling it. It was Ozzie and Daniel Silna, the owners of the American Basketball Association Spirits of St. Louis.
This episode, this segment of Hav Types is brought to you by the Public Library. The Public Library, sponsoring Hav Types since the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, and then Bobby Bonilla Day, where he gets almost $1.2 million until the year 2035, when he'll be 72 years old.
That's awesome.
For a contract he did with the Mets in 91.
Oh, my Lord.
Because they wanted to stretch it out. So he was like, sure.
How much was that contract for that they stretched it out like that? That's insane.
So, I know. They signed a 5-year, $29 million contract with him in 91. Highest paid National League player at the time. Then they said, hey, let's buy you out in the year 2000. So they said, okay, we'll pay you out the remaining $5.9 million in annual installments of nearly $1.2 million, including 8% interest for 25 years.
That was $5. Well, hold on. You said they owed $5 million.
I don't know. He said, okay, you don't owe me the rest of my contract, which was over $29 million.
Oh, no. Oh, it was 29. They owed $29 million at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Still,
I mean,
okay. They wanted to. No,
Yeah,
you read it
yeah,
and you
yeah.
just said they owed
Yeah, yeah.
$5.9 million.
It just sounds like a bad deal.
Why
the Mets made a bad deal?
That's an insane deal. I don't even understand how that they've paid more than in the first 6 years. They paid 5.9. They paid it off in the first 6 years, and actually the numbers don't even work out. It's not 8%. That's not 8%.
No, plus 8% interest.
There you go.
Or including or something. It's just anyways, okay, we're way down a bunny trail, but it's just fascinating to me when these bad deals are accidentally made or somebody says, yeah, fine, do it.
Every year, almost every year, the reason I know about this and I had to research it was because I started seeing a tweet once a year with some of the people in the baseball world that God knows why. I follow them because they do other sports too. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what the fuck? And somebody will post an article about it. And this is the day where he gets whatever million dollars.
Almost 1.2. He hasn't played baseball since October of 2001.
Awesome. Good for him.
So, oh my goodness, sorry. So, She-Hulk does a good job doing a good deal for somebody, just like the St. Louis franchisees got a good deal and apparently hopefully had good lawyers, and Bobby Bonilla had good lawyers. Jennifer Walters, She-Hulk, does right by her client. And then, next client in the door is none other than Christoph Doom.
Von Doom.
Von Doom, the son of...
How dare you leave the Von off?
Victor
You
Von
realize
Doom.
Doom's going to kill you now.
I know. I mean, he's...
Dr. Doom.
He's like Putin except in armor.
I didn't go to 8 years of evil medical school to be called Mr.
Right. And he wants to apply for asylum. And he wants her to represent him. And he's gone to, I forget, 14 different big law firms, other lawyers. And they said, nope, because... you don't want to deal with old dad.
Yeah. Well, and we also you sent a screenshot about it. She was having trouble getting clients because she'd been calling them, and finally she found out that her former firm has been blackballing her. And part of the reason he's been blackballing her, they had bought this incredibly expensive oak table or teak table out of the rainforest where millions of villagers died to produce it, and she broke it on her way out the door.
Yeah, by like touching it with her finger.
Just tapping it with her finger. Yes, I did. That one of the things superheroes showing off their strength like that always amuses me in comics. It's like dink and then crack.
She did Hulk out a little bit there.
Yeah, sure. She tapped her finger on a thing to make a point because they were dicks. They deserved it. They didn't deserve it. Don't damage property when you get fired.
Probably a bad idea.
Or when you quit. Either way.
Yeah. So he comes to her, and I don't know anything about asylum law at all, but she says, well, when did you come in the country? About a year ago. So no, it's kind of important. Oh, exactly a year ago. Our deadline to have you filed for asylum is today.
Yes.
And then, as we've been saying often, hijinks ensue. Because it is a race to the courthouse to get everything filed. Old school, apparently. There's no e-filing, I guess. Got to do this in person and have a
the
hearing.
Marvel Universe doesn't have the internet.
Right. But they do have a fantastic car that she finds in a storage unit near her.
The part of this, too, is they had a car because he had a car and a driver who turns out to be a Doombot. Right. So Dr. Doom obviously does not want his son to have asylum. So now we have the Battle of New York. Them trying to get there, and that's why they have to use the fantastic car, and trying to get to court is important. And now she has called the judge, and I literally personally only took one screenshot of this, and
I made a note of this too because of this. Go ahead.
It amused me, and I'm trying to find my screenshots now. Dang it! There we go. Photos. The only one I did.
Well, because it does link this to some of the other stuff we have read here recently.
Well, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing.
Oh.
She looks and goes, uh-oh, we only have half an hour to get to the court. The judge cleared her schedule for us, but she won't wait forever. There's not a judge in the world who will stay past 5.
Well, there's that, but she also says before that she's calling in a favor to the judge to say, hey, I'm on my way. The judge owes me a favor because I saved her daughter from a Skrull.
From a Skrull? Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah, no, I forgot about that. No, I just liked there's not a judge in the world who will stay past 5. So that makes it...
5 is being nice.
Well, she's doing a big favor. She saved her daughter's life from a Skrull. So the fact that she'll stay to 5, that's a huge favor for a judge.
And hey, maybe it was one of the Skrulls from the Kree Skrull War, one of the cows. I don't know. You don't know.
I do not know. I do not know. That's
So then, she's asylum granted, and then Doom shows up and says, "Son, come with me."
yes.
And that's the end of that.
Yes, it is.
That's the end of the story. So that was a good run. That was a cool issue and run. No.
So then she goes to San Francisco
to talk to her fellow lawyer, Matt Murdock.
Fellow lawyer and superhero.
And superhero.
Not to spoil anything. Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Hav, you did know Matt Murdock is Daredevil, right?
What?
Hav has just been reading a completely different set of Matt Murdock comics where he is just a lawyer that works superhero law.
And how did I watch that whole show on Netflix and not pick up on that? I have some issue. I have some problems with following basic story plot. Apparently,
clearly.
So she goes there to ask him some advice because she's hung up on the fact that she thinks her client, her former client at this point, really does want and need asylum, and how far is she willing to go to help her client? And they're hanging out talking about this on the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, she talks about how great the view is, and Matt's like, rude?
Yeah. Hey, blind here. Gosh. There's also a cool scene, I don't know if I took a screenshot of that, where Matt says to her, "Still, you'd think once maybe someday," and he just said, "We've never seen each other in court and never had a case against each other." And she says, "Careful what you wish for, pal." And I don't know if that's foreshadowing in this arc or if they ever do go up against each other in court, but I would love to see that if that's happened. I don't know that it has or hasn't. I just thought that was
I don't
cool.
remember. It might be foreshadowing, and it's also something that writers will do just in case.
Yeah.
They might have had no plan to have them meet up, but then they get cred for foreshadowing something if somewhere down the line.
Yeah. So she decides to go to Latveria, Doom's country, and talk to Spring Jr.
The whole thing she wants to talk to him about, you kind of left this out, was since they're both lawyers and superheroes, it is a very lawyerly thing is you're supposed to strongly advocate for your client. And they
zealously advocate.
Thank you. Zealously advocate for your client. And they have their level of zealously is at a much higher scale, and should they pursue it that way? And Matt's point was, no, we can't go beyond what a normal lawyer would do. Although he did allude to that he did at times and most often regretted doing. He's like, no, you should not do that. You should just zealously, to the point where all lawyers zealously do. Don't do it. I've done it. It ain't great. Don't do it. So she immediately, and he knows, she's immediately goes to Latveria.
Well, and he tells her the story about he's defending Black Cat on a murder rap in New York.
Yeah.
Spider-Man comes to him as Daredevil and says, "Now she's framed. Here's the evidence." Mm-hmm. To the point, and he's kind of telling her, do as I say, not as I do, because him and Spidey go to Rikers and break out Black Cat, and there's, it is what it is. Now I think everything turned out okay, obviously.
Yes.
Comics, but yeah, it's very much a do as I say, not as I do, and of course she does as he did, not as he was telling her not to do, to get all convoluted word-wise.
Yes. And yes.
And our video connection has stopped.
No, we're still on here though. It doesn't matter. I can see you.
You can see me. I just can't. Yeah. Okay, it stopped on my end. So yeah, she goes to Latveria.
And she fights, if I recall correctly, and I read this right immediately after we recorded the last one. So, and because I was so busy wading my way through the other one that I did not get a chance to do any review. She fights a giant Doombot, right?
Like ginormous.
Yeah, like the size of a building Doombot.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about comics is they do try to give their characters something to fight that's on their level. It's like, okay, here's a ginormous Doombot. Think Sentinel size.
Like King Kong size, yeah like huge. Yeah, Sentinel size, exactly. Yeah. I mean, holding her, and then she busts out of the hand, and eventually Junior shows up. I call him Junior. Christoph shows up, and he has a heart-to-heart with his dad, as much as you can have a heart-to-heart with your dad Doom, as Dr. Doom.
And actually he hits the right points. You want me to be like you, except you're not letting me be like you because you would never let anybody treat me the way you treat me.
Right.
It was the basic gist of it. And it was like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. Okay.
Would you have your life dictated to like
Yeah.
you're dictating my life? And Doom's like, no, I see your point. Now get out of my country, She-Hulk,
Yeah.
before I throw you out,
I
literally.
will let you live. He's always so
Yeah.
magnanimous for a monster. I'm choosing to let you live. I'm like, you say that a lot to people that probably you couldn't kill.
And I was going to say, his win-loss record, not so great.
Those were Doombots.
Oh, God.
They
Yes.
always retcon it. It was a Doombot. He's never been defeated. It was always a Doombot.
Well, then he doesn't build very good Doombots, because they always get defeated.
Well, he can't have a Doombot that can be as all-powerful as he is, because then it might realize it was him and think he was a Doombot and win the battle.
Yeah. Well, and then in the meantime, I'm sorry, if there's more you wanted to do on Latveria.
No, I'm good.
Well, in the meantime, Angie's trekking out to North Dakota to try to find out more about this blue file, and she gets there. The courthouse was flooded or something, and she finds the file. Is going to make a photocopy of it, and dude, tell me if I'm wrong. The dude that was the clerk or whatever shoots her in the back and leaves her for dead in the middle of the wintry, desolate nowhere.
Yes.
Where she is in North Dakota.
Yes.
Then her monkey throws up in her mouth some kind of gooey green or blue thing, and she comes back to life. Did I take that all in correctly?
That's probably, I told you it's been a while since I read it, so sure. I know she didn't die, so that must be what happened.
But she definitely, it just says pop. I remember that. And yeah, I just remember being, I was like, I want to read more about Angie and her monkey.
Yeah. And you said you did. You went ahead because didn't that kind of where it ended, the arc?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They kind of cliffhanger the crap out of it,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
To
the point where, like, I literally wrote this down, literally. Well, shit. I have to read more about the blue file.
Yeah, and I may go. I purposely, since I have, when we did Miss Marvel, I read ahead because I was having fun with it, and then I regretted it because I was bringing stuff up from the next. So I've stopped myself from rereading further along, and I just enjoyed this. I'm glad you did too. The whole point of it is it's fun. There's going to be a She-Hulk TV show. So what is with all the clicking?
Sorry, can you hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's
I'm just
okay.
trying to find the dude that shoots her in the back because I'm wondering. There's all sorts of things I'm wondering about the blue file. Is that the plaintiff? Is that the dude that sued everybody? Why is he so perfect?
Well, I thought you read more.
No, I borrowed it.
You haven't read it yet. Oh, okay.
No.
So, okay, cool. Well, maybe we'll bring that up on our next podcast. Actually, we probably won't.
Well, and I was just going to point. I am a sucker for primates in comic books. I love Detective Chimp.
I know. You
I
like the
love
monkeys.
I love Gorilla Grodd. If you throw a monkey or
That's
an
great.
ape on a cover or a dinosaur, I probably will buy the damn thing. I'm serious. Devil Dinosaur, Godzilla comic books.
There is nothing wrong with you liking what you like.
Yeah.
Even him. It's okay.
And I remember a DC publisher or one of the head honchos at DC years ago, and this is after I figured out that I love Detective Chimp and Devil Dinosaur by Jack Kirby. Something else for you.
I like Devil Dinosaur.
You do?
Yeah.
Did you like the redo they did here recently with the little girl?
Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur? Yes, I absolutely adored that.
So great.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
And that is truly a kid's comic. They wrote it for kids, and it is outstanding.
To the point where I was so disappointed. I have nieces that are 6 and 8 now, and a goddaughter, my cousin's kid, who is 9, and I got them all a couple issues of it, and they could have cared less about it. I was so disappointed.
That's okay.
I thought, this is perfect. It's a little girl. It's in a comic book. They're gonna love it. They're gonna get into comic books, and wah wah.
Yeah, it's okay.
But yeah. Oh no, because a publisher long ago has apparently said that you want to sell a comic book, put a monkey on the cover, or a dinosaur, and it'll sell.
People love monkeys and dinosaurs.
They do. Godzilla.
Yeah.
King Kong.
Yes. King Kong. Oh yeah, he's a monkey. I was like, he's not a dinosaur. I'm not very bright.
So one of the things I did want to, unless there's more you want to talk about She-Hulk in particular.
Not in particular.
The one thing I take away from reading these two things together, you had the sexist misogyny of Kree Skrull War and in treating Wanda, Scarlet Witch, and Janet, Wasp just so poorly and so over the top sexist, versus She-Hulk, where she is large and in charge.
Empowerment.
Yeah. So the things have changed a little bit.
She-Hulk is badass.
She is. So
this is my woke agenda.
It is. Gosh darn it. They would hate. You mentioned that you wanted to do, that you were making a point of recommending or suggesting we read.
I was joking about that.
I know. Okay.
Yeah. No. I made a joke because I keep bringing it has nothing to do with any kind of agenda. These are comic books I really, really like, and that's the whole point of reading them. I'm not doing comic books for an agenda thing. I'm like, these are comic books I like. Let's read them and let's talk about them.
No,
and they happen to be female centric. So,
well, how dare you?
Yeah,
that's not how. Those aren't the comic books I grew up reading.
Well, except they literally were. You and I read She-Hulk when we were reading comic books.
I love She-Hulk.
Yeah.
I looked up and saw that, speaking of She-Hulk, that the sensational She-Hulk by John Byrne that started in '88 is on Hoopla.
Oh, I may have to delve into that then.
I mean, that's what I was thinking, and I was thinking about jokingly, but playing it straight, saying, and now we're going to do the first arc of the original Fantastic Four, just to go full scale, just to try to draw you off sides, just see how, because that's where Sue Storm was getting kidnapped all the time.
Oh my God.
And Reed Richards is just an over-the-top chauvinistic pig.
I would actually be fine. One of the first comic book podcasts I listened to when I first started listening to podcasts was one called, it started out with, screw it, we're just going to talk about Spider-Man. And it's two brothers, and they are, I sit right in between them on ages. One was born in 70 and one was born in 76. So I am literally, and they actually have a brother who's my age. And growing up, they read the reprints of the original Spider-Man arc. And so they did, every episode was one of the issues of Spider-Man, starting with Amazing Fantasy 1.
Wow.
Or whatever, Amazing Fantasy
15.
Yeah, that's sorry. And then then the Spider-Man, and then they went through each one through their first season. Then they came back with, because they also read the Fantastic Four ones, the reprints, so they did the same thing with Fantastic Four, although they didn't do one episode per issue. They did a few, and I started listening to that, but I'm not as big a fan, and oh my God, you were so right. So yeah, I would absolutely, if you do at some point want to read that first arc, we can talk about it, because it's just from a history of comic books and what this new era of comics that started in the Silver Age with the Marvel Comics started with, and what it's become would be an interesting compare and contrast, talking about themes of comics and how much they put in those first few episodes. I mean, issue 2 thank you, issue 2 was, you're so excited about that, issue 2 was the Skrulls, as we talked about already, and how quick they got to Doctor Doom and how quick they did all sorts of things. So no, you could absolutely suggest that. Speaking of suggesting, what do you want to read next time?
So I am going to at some point probably suggest that original FF run by Lee and Kirby.
No.
I will probably
not the run. We're not reading the whole run.
We're going to read the whole.
Then we're going to have to do more than one podcast on that.
I mean, the first 6 issues or something.
Mm-hmm.
But also another run I'd like to explore Fantastic Four wise that is She-Hulk centric is John Byrne's run on Fantastic, not that whole run, because that is voluminous, but some of that. But no, I'm going to change it up radically. I'm going to suggest, and I had it pulled up, that we read the first arc of DC's Starman, the 1994 comic. And I bet you it's something you have never read. We find out about him in, do you remember when we read Golden Age?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, it's the same author. We talked about that. Is it on Hoopla?
It sure is.
Cool. Okay. We can do that.
I can tell you're enthused.
No, I actually remember liking some stuff about him. I might like this. I remember saying at the time you brought it up that I might read that. I might like it. Yeah. Because I liked that writer, and I actually liked that character. So, no, I could enjoy that. So, screw you, Hav. I might like something you've suggested. I've liked a lot. I've liked the majority of the things you have suggested. I would say I've liked some of the things. I've liked a few.
I like that's one thing. Part of this, there's this panel on this one page of this one comic of this one arc,
and I don't remember which it was, but I think it was not. It didn't make me vomit into my mouth a little bit.
That's high praise. That's high praise.
The Old Guard is what I'm suggesting.
I have what huh?
I brought that up last year because they made a movie out of it on Netflix with Charlize Theron. It's called The Old Guard, and it's by...
Is it on the Hoopla?
It is on the Hoopla. It is The Old Guard by Greg Rucka, Rucka, and Leandro Fernandez. It's a miniseries. Old soldiers never die, and some of them don't even fade away. Cursed with immortality, Andromaca of Scythia and her comrades in arms ply their trade for those who can find and afford their services. But in the 21st century, being immortal is a difficult secret to keep, and when you live long enough, you learn there are many fates worse than death. I read it before I watched the movie, and I quite liked it. And then I only found out about this because they made a movie. It's from the book's from 2017, and when they made the movie, I was like, huh. And I found it on Hoopla, and I read it, and then I watched the movie, and I enjoyed the movie too. But I'll be curious to see what you think about it.
Do you want to double it up and have me read the comic and watch the movie if it's still available on the Netflix?
Well, it's a for Netflix movie, so it's available. If you want to do that, you can. Yeah. I think just read it. You tell you what, you can do whatever you want. Let me know. Make a decision on that. Because I'll want to rewatch the movie because I've only seen the movie once. But I would definitely read the comic first.
No, I'm going to read the comic first for sure. For sure. And then if I got time, which I'm sure I will, I just looked it up. It's only a 2-hour movie. It's not a series. It's a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, it's a movie. I kind of wish they'd have done a series, but I think I don't know. Well, it's who's in it. She probably didn't want to do a series. Yeah. So I hope they make a second movie because they cliffhangered that. But yeah, I think cool. I think it could be fun. Well, I liked it. So yeah.
Okay. Good deal. Well, hey, did we just do a podcast?
We did, except we didn't mention that you're on Twitter.
I am on the Twitter. Mine is Hav Gonzo Tweets is my handle, and yours is Herring Red Reel.
That is correct. And we are also have a Twitter page for the podcast at J&C Talk Comics. And that's and written out.
Yeah, and is written out. And then your lovely brother, great brother, did us a solid, and we have a webpage that is havandcharles.com where all the podcasts are very easily found, and you can click and play, and it's quite frankly, it's what I use to just go to the latest one so I can self-indulgently hear our latest podcast.
That's okay to listen to the podcast. I listen to the podcast.
And speaking of listening to the podcast, thank you, everyone that listens. Technology is far beyond my capabilities to understand how it works, but you can see that people are listening, and it's cool that y'all are. I still long for an email from somebody, just even if it's just to say hi.
Is there anybody out there?
Papa, can you hear me? I don't know why that cracked me up. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So, and, of course, thank you, Charles, for doing all the heavy lifting on the production side of this stuff and for doing the podcast with me, as always.
Thank you for doing the podcast with me. Thank you to all of y'all that are listening at home or on the go or at work. You probably shouldn't listen at work, but I don't care. I don't control you. All right. Until next time. Goodbye.
Bye.